Thank you, guys. Are y'all having a good time? Yeah? I love TED, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. So I'm going to take a little detour here and tell you guys a little bit about me and about my journey and my life. I grew up in Mississippi, and I never set foot in a school. I wasn't allowed to watch TV. I wasn't allowed to play video games. I didn't really go to summer camps or anything like that. I occupied my time in a little bit of a different way. The first time that I saw a fiddle, I was 2 years old, and I remember sitting in the living room at home and seeing a video of a classical violinist named Isaac Perlman, and just absolutely being moved and transformed by what seemed to be magic coming from the violin. And I was just absolutely moved at that point in my life and insisted on having a violin and on learning to play. So I started training and taking classical lessons at the age of 2. And from that point forward, I had this dream and this ambition to do something really big with my music. And I remember every night I would line up all my dolls, and I would line up my family every night after dinner, and I would put on a little show. I think at one point I acted out the entire Sound of Music. And and I would close my eyes and I would imagine myself performing in front of thousands of people. And it was at this point in my life that there was almost this awakened voice within myself, basically a voice that told me that I was meant to make an impact on the world with music. And that might sound silly or too ambitious, but it was a drive within myself. And this voice became the driving force behind the rest of my career, and it will be forward in every obstacle that I face. And it became a way for me to believe in myself and to realize that I had the potential to have a really big influence on the world. So the first time that I had the opportunity to actually perform in front of an audience, I was 7, and I had just recently learned how to play fiddle music. I had switched from classical music to fiddle music, and I'd had about 6 fiddle lessons. And I remember I stood on stage at this contest, and I won first place in this contest. And I remember standing there on stage and seeing the audience cheering for me. And I knew from that moment that I had to get a band together, and I had to start touring, and I had to start doing whatever I could, risking whatever I could to play music. So I got a band together somehow, and I started traveling, and I started playing music festivals. My mom and I basically went all over the country playing festivals and doing various contests. And when I was about 11 years old, we were contemplating moving to Nashville. And I was doing a lot of traveling to Nashville. And when I was about 11 years old, I kind of started to gain some attention from the music industry and from the business side of music. And I was offered actually a record deal from Capitol Records, which is a huge record label in Nashville. And I remember sitting in this executive's office, you know, an 11-year-old little girl, and being told that I had to sell 1 million albums the first time out or they would drop me. And I barely even made it to the elevator after that meeting before I was completely in tears. The pressure was just too much to handle at that age. And so we decided to take a different route. And instead of moving to Nashville and signing with this record label, we bought an RV. And when I was about 12 years old, we took this RV, we sold our house in Mississippi, we bought an RV, and we started traveling all over the country, just my mom and I, playing shows and festivals, and that's what landed us in Austin, Texas, about 5 years ago, which was a life-changing move, it turns out. So about 6 months after being in Austin, Texas, I had the opportunity to meet a band called Asleep at the Wheel, who then introduced me to Willie Nelson, and I was asked to play fiddle for Willie Nelson. So I started going on tour. This was when I was about 13 or 14, and I started going on tour with Willie and playing with a lot of different bands around Texas, and had some really incredible opportunities. But at this point, I decided that I wanted to do something more. I wanted to be more than just a fiddle player. I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to sing, and I wanted to write music, and I wanted my songs to have an impact on the world. At this point, a lot of people kind of told me that I couldn't do that because I wasn't a born singer, and I wasn't that great then. I was good at playing the fiddle, but I wasn't that great of a singer. And a lot of people told me that I couldn't do that, and that all I was ever going to be was a sideman. So this was probably the biggest struggle of my career so far. But I began singing 2 hours every day, and after about a year of that, people finally began to come up to me and tell me what a great singer I was. And I can't possibly express to you the feeling that it gave me to hear people come up and tell me that I was great at something that once upon a time it was impossible for me to be good at. And it goes back to the same thing. I had to listen to that voice within myself that told me that I was going to have an influence on the world no matter what anybody else told me. So at this point, I had my band together, I had my songs together, my voice, and I had the opportunity in 2011 to play at Lollapalooza in Chicago and to play at Austin City Limits Music Festival and a lot of bigger shows. And I began being known as Ruby Jane, the artist, not just Ruby Jane, the fiddle player, which was huge for me. And I worked on my debut album back in 2011, which was a bit of a veer off of the path of what people expected from me. I was known pretty much as a swing fiddle player and a bluegrass fiddle player, and this album was going to be indie and rock and something completely out of the ordinary. But I self-produced it, and I self-arranged it and wrote the songs for it, and it shocked a lot of people, but it was a pleasant surprise to them, and it was something that, again, I had to kind of listen to myself and say, well, what do you want to be in your life? Go out and be it and do it no matter what people tell you. So after that album came out, I continued touring, and to this day, I'm still writing and touring. And basically, just the lessons that I've learned, have been that we all have this voice, this kind of notion inside of ourselves that we're meant to be something, and it's different for everybody. A lot of people kind of regard it as the voice of fantasy, not really reality, but I prefer to think of it as the voice of potential. And that's how I treated my own voice, and that's what became my driving force to overcome every obstacle. I mean, it may sound like I did a lot of these things easily, but there's been many nights when I've laid down and been completely scared out of my mind of the risk that I was taking and kind of the unknown. But in listening to myself and listening to that voice of what I could be, that's kind of what has brought me to overcome every single one of those obstacles when someone told me I couldn't sing or that I couldn't be famous or laughed at me when I told them I wanted to make an impact on the world. So the most important thing to me has just been believing in myself and listening to that voice. And once I did that, the possibilities were limitless. So thank you, guys. This is Drew, by the way. Y'all give him a hand. This is a song I wrote called Ticket Out. You should be restless, but you're stuck in your bed, consumed by the thoughts going round in your head. Oh, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.